Global stocks have outperformed the S&P 500 to start this year. But this morning, Citigroup says that run is over, double upgrading U.S. equities while cutting Europe to neutral. Seema Modi here with more on the action we're seeing overseas just as we head into the European close. Seema.
It's an important time. Sarah, European financials faring a lot better than U.S. banks in the past month, despite news of Credit Suisse and Deutsche Bank. And that has allowed European stock indices to outperform most global markets, including the S&P 500 this quarter, up around 6%. The rally led by France and Germany, both with double-digit percentage point gains, due in part to reduced concerns around an energy shortage and optimism around a China recovery. A gauge used to measure activity in China's services sector hitting its highest level in more than a decade. That came out this morning. So that, along with the restructuring of two big Chinese tech giants, Alibaba and JD.com, that has lifted sentiment around Chinese stocks. The Shanghai Composite, though still underperforming the S&P 500 so far this year, it is up around 6%. Citi, while downgrading Europe, worth noting, it does remain positive on China. Strategists there say the reopening should lead to an acceleration both in GDP and earnings growth. Morgan Stanley's top strategist says she's still betting on emerging markets. HSBC also writing that the dollar will remain in high focus next month. And while there's less fear of a hawkish Fed coupled with low volatility, it is the dollar, Sarah and Carl, that could determine whether emerging markets outperform.
Always. And everybody's gotten relief from the weak dollar so far this year and certainly for the month. I get the eye of the storm is now in the U.S. and in the U.S. banking system. Is that the cause? Is that why the outperformance in global stocks?
Yeah, there seems to be this perception that the banking stress is still confined to the U.S., and that's perhaps one of the reasons that global equities have been able to outperform. And interestingly enough, I was speaking to Julian Emanuel at Evercore ISI, asking him what's the biggest event you're watching in March, and he says it's not a state council meeting in China. It's not the elections in Latin America. It is First Republic earnings on April 13th. That will drive sentiment not just here, but overseas.
Yeah, and then, of course, J.P. Morgan on the 14th. Still some discussion. I think it was Citi last night. It said, look, Tier 1 capital still better this cycle than it was in 2015 or 2008 because there have been so many hard lessons learned by the banks, and they would argue policymakers too, Seema.
Yeah, it's a great point. Who learned what during the last financial crisis and who's better for it?
Seema Modi on the banks. It's going to be an eventful set of earnings in a couple of weeks.